to open this debate. Time and place is yours here.
Okay, am I audible?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. If I get cut out because of my connection, please do just like verbally contact me. Yeah, just make sure that, let me inform. I don't have any gender preferred pronoun. Before, I would like to give a bit of just a bit of a warning that if there's any content that seems to showcase um things that are sensitive, I would like to apologize in advance. There's no intention to generalize anyone. Okay, going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. I would do several clarification before we enter the debate in discussing further to widen the support matter. The first clarification is the affirmative goal is to not suddenly equalize the standard between NBA and WNBA. These are not supposed to be the comparative within the debate. We are discussing about the improvement within WNBA with the current existing standard that they have, which unfortunately is a very poor welfare toward the player. So in any comparison in regarding that, we don't think that that would be the burden. But assuming that that would be the burden, I think that they have a different type of track record. They have a different type of historical trajectory as well. So it would take a much more different type of discussion to be able to talk about whether or not they should have to be in an equal footing to begin with. But second thing that I would like to clarify is in regard to what players right, because I believe the negative team might want to be able to discuss about this. Just because that the decision is taken by the management and also the team owner does not mean that the voice of the player are not comprised in that particular discussion, because teams and management voice in regard to how poor the performance that is, let's say, given, and also the standard that is given by WNBA are representative to majority of player voice that has been so long not getting the rights that they deserve, from the paycheck to the extent of the welfare, such as in let's say investment in terms of healthcare. I would like to agree that while that player, like a basketball player in general, still get more comparatively to what, let's say, white collar worker in general, you need to be able to understand the consequences and also the type of job that they are giving. So within the standard that this WNBA player are currently getting, it's not something that is compensatable with the type of risk that they have to be able to have in case that they would get injury, or in the sustainable future where they would not be able to get any other profession, because there is a time limitation that you have whenever that you work in a sport industry. But assuming that they would want to talk about player strike as well, even if that it is not within the interest of the player, within that there are two discussions that need to be prioritized, which is a scale of priority. We believe that the players that have the ability to opt out from the interest of wanting to demonstrate and wanting to be able to against this particular policy are more likely going to be a player that have that particular privilege to begin with, who don't face the same concern as the majority of other player, who get the external sponsors from other activity, for instance, like modeling, right? So we think that this should be less prioritized. But assuming that this is an important concern, we feel like in worst case scenario, player like this that don't like this particular policy can still be a free agent. So in that particular essence, team and management do not restrict the particular idea and also principle. But what is the most important aspect in this debate? WNBA is an organization. Inside of it consists of many teams, owner and manager, which is owned by private entity, which representing their own ideals and also team interests, right? The debate would like to support implementation of lockout with WNBA activity as a whole. The support in affirmative will be defined as such. Three things. One, prevention in participating in games, including all-star game. Second of all, prevention on participating in broadcast draft picks, any other activity. But third, actively campaigning for the improvement for the system as well. So this can go hand in hand. And we don't just like stop people from participating. We are going to actively voice that out throughout the management and also the broadcasting system that all this team owner have, especially in regard to what the welfare of the player. Well, then this is something that need to be focused on the debate, because within that the current contextualization of the increased number of rating are not an improvement that is felt by the player. This is the perfect time to do lockout because of their rising statistic. It implies that there is a rising interest from viewers, which also imply that there is a rising number of investor and ticket and merchandise profit that is gained by WNBA. This unfortunately will not come hand hand in hand. So if they want to assume that, oh, if that's the case, let's not do lockout because WNBA are going to improve and self-fix themselves. That is not the case. Three things. A, WNBA historically have been very lenient with the poor standard that they have, with decades and decades of performance within the team. This is due to the high number of misogynistic mindset of treating women athletes as less valuable asset than the male counterparts in NBA, and this is supported by the people that in board management. The issue of welfare have been hidden under the defense of organization first. However, the profit and benefit from sponsor are not contributed to anything that is felt directly by the player, which is an essential factor to what the win and everything that has been contributed to what at WNBA. But B, WNBA are reluctant to address the concern on inequality in general and also poor performance of the service that they provide in general. While that the public opinion are probably shared through social media to say that women matter, action are mostly performative, where the increase of interest happened within the past decades and we see no improvement that are significant that showcase that there is no consistency within the action. Negative might say that the WNBA need to invest money for their improvement of organization first, but we don't think that this is relevant because A, current existing profit and budget has been invested enough to make meaningful broadcasts. WNBA challenges are not about more exposure. That means even if I want to assume the best about WNBA, it is about poor strategizing in terms of where they should keep their money, right? It's about tackling misogynistic preference. The only reason why WNBA is not popular because the general populace of sport fans believe that basketball female sport are not as interesting as basketball in NBA to begin with. So increasing broadcast is not always effective as it usually faced with more backlash of how performative the female basketball is, which is why our solution is better because improving welfare is the best way to go. Understand that the rising of statistic right now are mainly contributed because of the rise of popularity of the basketball player themselves as an idol to begin with, right? Practically it provide more motivation from player to feel appreciated if you improve their welfare, boost WNBA player as profitable and desirable profession, hence improving potential talent recruitment. These are essential because the key point of WNBA popularity and status quo rely on idealism. The contribution from player is the reason as to why they got so big right now. Accumulative fans come from general sport player fans that women can play basketball as good as the NBA player. But the people that see the hardship that the player have to face during and pursuing of their dreams. But even if it is not an issue of misogyny, within that, the growth of fans need to be prioritized with WNBA, which is why we should do lockout, because we need to boost the morale of the internal teams and boost the morale of fans that support their idol of this time. If you don't do this particular thing, and if you lost the momentum, we feel like it's going to delay the discourse even further and potentially generate generalization and normalization of bad practices. Right now, with the increased statistic and number of people that are viewing WNBA, whether it's the perfect time for us to raise this particular discourse to ensure that there are more people that are aware that the internal livelihood of the people that are working there are not as good as what it is being exposed. The essence of this particular idea and the benefit that we would like to be able to have is to have an increase of awareness to the nature of the organization, but also to attract more people to essentially go and participate within the particular discourse and discussion. It's important because it's the most relevant aspect of WNBA improvement in general as well, which centralized in its player, but it's principally fair for WNBA to allocate their profit and benefit more to the hard work of the player, not only because they're essential, but the contribution that they have been given so far that are not attributed to a much more stable profession are somehow inhumane. We believe that within this particular strategy that we would do, it's not only that it is representative to what the team player, but within that it is representative to what the fans in general. But remember, WNBA so far has failed to do its role because just remember, as a federation, your accountability should go toward the people that love that sport, which is the player, to the player that benefit and that you extract access of profit from, which is why we are more than proud to propose in this motion.
And thank the first affirmative speaker for the speech. To open the case from side negative, I welcome the first negative speaker. Time and place is yours, speaker.
Okay. Setting up my personal timer. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Backing down is not always the solution. Sometimes you just gotta do it. just like what Nike said. So before I start onto my arguments and rebuttals, I would like to give a few short points of setups. Firstly, on the status quo. So as the context slide also suggests, the WNBA is experiencing growth that is seen throughout like viewership counts, right? But this doesn't mean that it's only an increase in views in like videos and stuff, but it also means that there is a growth in like an increase in promotions and sponsorships too. And this will play on why these are actually more important and it can help advocate women's right also, which is actually better than lockout. But nextly, I would like to give a short characterization. First, on the lockout itself, we think that it is a drastic measure if taken where participation in like games or activities are fully halted, right? Don't forget that this also means that salaries will be halted as well, meaning that players will not get their income, and because the publication of their game that season, for example, will be stopped, then the fans will all forced to stop watching because there are no publication this season. Secondly, we will like to give flight on our preference in fighting for women's right. Like, yes, we acknowledge that there are major like disparities between men's NBA or just like NBA and WNBA players and the system as well. You will know like who is Stephen Curry and LeBron James, but when they ask about who is WNBA's top player, then silence will be given. Now, the moment when we go with the mechanism of locking out, it means that we will sweep the dust of respect and chances of women under the rug. That's why our stance here is to increase the improvement of the players' financial compensation, health benefits, working conditions and stuff like that, but also gradually help the internal system of the WNBA to be better without having to do a lockout, because it will actually bring more harm than good. More on that later on my first argument, but before, I would like to give just a short rebuttal on how under our side we cannot give like the fair pay and better working conditions without lockout. But let's not forget that like other than fair pay and better working conditions that are not available in the WNBA right now, it started from the core problem, which is like they think that women's sports are not as sustainable as the men's and stuff like that. And it is harder under their side of the house because with lockout, that means halting the whole season. It means stopping the viewers, stopping the sponsorships, and this can actually affect more on the women's sports, because then it'll be like, oh, why are they like stopping the whole season? They are not stable and stuff like that. Actually, more on this on my first argument on why is lockout actually not the right choice. So being on lockout again, it means halting everything, right? That would mean A, halting the players' income. Like, we recognize how WNBA players already face unfair pay, especially in comparison to the male or like man NBA. I don't know. Halting the players' income completely would cause like a sudden financial instability, right? This is harmful, especially for those women who rely on their salaries as their main income. And as government has also stated how they only have like a, a certain amount of time where they are able to play in the WNBA, and like a stop in this pay, even if it seems like, oh, it's just for a season, is actually a big gap. So other than like living expenses and whatnot, money is also needed for them, right? When they are like training or making sure their health and diet are intact. Because let's be real, healthy diet are expensive, especially nowadays. And then B, impacting on their career. So the lockout may take effect only in like a season, but it would actually give a long-term consequence, especially career-wise. Again, they are time-bound, and how their WNBA's massive growth or whatever. This means that there is like this momentum with each year they are gaining more and more fans, which means like more sponsors. And this momentum, if it's halted, it can be hard, especially with a competition with other leagues or like other sports. Sponsors and fans, especially sponsors, would rather invest in something that is more stable. Building connection with fans and with sponsorships take a long time, like it's steady long time. A lockout has a risk on stopping said progress. The proposition argues on how lockout is needed so that the league is forced to like hear the voices, and they must address the bad pay and working conditions and whatnot. And while the lockout may give pressure to the league, it would be only short term, and the negative impacts that I've said before will be more harmful than that. Government also cannot say that fans would like end up supporting this lockout, because in the end, a fan's main interest is the entertainment value that they get from watching. This means lockout stopping the season would leave fans without a game to watch, and b, a sports fan are more likely like loyal to the game and not to like only an individual player or whatnot. And stopping this game will make them disappointed or frustrated, and in the end they will not want to support this WNBA anymore. Now on my second argument on what we would do instead, because again lockout, I think we think that it's such a drastic measure and it does not need to be taken because there are other incentives to retain those fans in the first place. It will utilize more growth in the fandom, and the issue will then be more heard because, of course, public advocacy, right? Especially from like social media, because then it will pressure the league even more, because the league, more than anything, is profit oriented, and they have this like um face, like they need to have a good profile, and if they are bashed online, then it'll be hard for them, especially with more fans. Next, by securing better sponsorships, then again, social media advocacy, but also like events or campaigns by the sponsorship. Because let's be real, most more campaigns and like even if it's just a social media event, money for that campaign. Both of these can and both the fans and the sponsorships can come hand in hand, because more sponsors mean more fancy gear and cooler ads, which then will create more support for the women's athletes. And this is why, even though partnerships are like profit oriented, they will still have the social pressure to advocate on the right, which is why without the lockout jeopardizing the long-term stability of the team, we advocate for a more long-term issue, which is why I'm proud to oppose.
I thank the first negative speaker for the speech. To continue the case from side affirmative, I welcome the second affirmative speaker. Be here.
Okay, just checking. Am I audible or correctly with this microphone?
Audible.
Okay, thank you. If anything happened, please just verbally disrupt me so I will know something is going on with my connection or my voice. Right. Wait one moment. Let me set my camera. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The first clarification that I will give for this debate is how opposition stands is that they want to play while advocating for women's right, and they believe that that is far more effective while not eradicating the source of income and livelihood of this player. First things first, I think that by them playing and advocating, it will not hurt the WNBA's organization's profit. So my question to them is, why would it be effective to ensure that there will be policy change? There will be incentive by the internal like elites and bureaucrats within the organization to actually make changes that is demanded by our people. They cannot, they can just say that, oh yeah, maybe not now, but maybe if they continue to just like keep on advocating for women's rights, maybe in the future we will care. Like, I don't think there is guarantee because their profit is not hurt. In our side, in affirmative, there's clear separation on where fans' reaction is directed. Fans' anger are going to be directed to WNBA organization, while their support and their sympathy are going to individual teams and players. So brand deals with corporations for teams can still happen. For example, corporations that cares about women because they do exist, or even if corporations that just want to bandwagon and look good and look performatively feminist, for example, they will also still exist. This is something that is normal in sport because if you have heard the news, in track running, there is a corporation that advocates for running gear that is not branded at all, and they give it to all of the unsponsored athlete because they think that nowadays athlete has become like a walking advertisement, for example. So culture like that already exists in sport in general, but especially in WNBA, where it is very clear the message that they're going to propose, and it is pretty feminism is a pretty popular thing to propose anyway. I don't think that individual teams and individual players will lose support just because WNBA as an organization is going to lose support, and therefore that clear separation that will hurt WNBA not the player will happen in our side, and that's something that was not proven in opposition. The second thing, the concern about not getting paid when you're not working. I think that the concept is the same like unpaid leave, right? Because this is not like, oh, I am striking against my employer. It is more like your employer is inviting you to strike against the organization and the union above you. So it's quite different from the usual worker strike. So of course, probably it will not be full pay because then your team will have to reserve some cash reserve. You will still get paid. This is the same logic as currently how a player in NBA and WNBA who cannot play due to injury during a game, they will rest and still get paid like 30%. The ones that are hurt, it's going to be the organization, not only in terms of cash, but also in terms of image and favorability from fan base, which is the backbone of any support for any sport organization. So yeah, the concern about leave and they're wanting to co-opt our benefit of advocacy will not happen. Now, let's move to my positive case, with the consequences of not locking out in the negative team. I think that we need to look back on the context of growth of WNBA fan base that has been established by Jess. I think that the worst case is that, oh, maybe it has not been growing in the past year and only grow now because in the past it was hindered by misogynistic perception. How does that affect the way that the stakeholder in a WNBA make their decision? I think that the reason why the initial investment on the start of WNBA creation is way lower than NBA is not only that it is new, because it is largely based on the assumption that women's sport doesn't sell as much. So the marketing budget and effort for a new sport that is male dominated, let's say like suddenly we want to do sepak takraw, I assure you will be huge just because the players are male. It doesn't matter that the sport is new, they're still going to pay a lot for it. So it was weird for WNBA, that is a women variant of an already existing sport that is already highly profitable, to not get as much trust and as much initial funding because of the assumption that it's not going to sell. Even if at the very beginning you're going to operate on loss, it's very normal because you need to amass fan base. So why is it that we're going to tolerate the stakeholders to keep doing that, right? Because by not locking out, you're allowing the stakeholders and bureaucrats to continue assuming that you're not able to do well, that you're not able to grow your fan base, and they will keep playing safe and they will never expand your working quality, your working condition quality. So I don't think that something that is based on assumption is something that is fair for WNBA specifically, because it is based on misogynistic perception. But secondly, even if so, even if it's not like misogynistic, right? And it's just purely business, I don't think WNBA should operate like a K-pop company, right? Where you don't pay your newly debuted idols a lot until you break even. Like you wait until you break even, then you pay their wage. I don't think that's the way, because right now the teams are not operating on loss and the organization is not in deficit. So it doesn't make sense for them to continue prioritizing anything else that is like communal based without increasing compensation and working quality for individuals, because they keep saying that, oh, but organization comes first. If we want to be as big as NBA, we need to come first. Like, I don't think that is an excuse that should work, because the nature of business and organization is different. But secondly, let's assume that the cause is not misogyny, right? Like the best case that, oh, it's slow because WNBA is still very young compared to NBA. Like there's like literally like 50 plus years difference difference because one is only like 20, 30 years, the other is 80, 90 years in existence. Let's say that it's just because of that. Maybe I can say that, oh, sure, we can forgive the cautiousness of the investor of not wanting to overspend on a newly established sport. But what we cannot tolerate is how the growing organization is reacting to the growth of the fan base. All characterization of fan base is not correct because I don't think that sports fans just watch for the game. They usually root for specific teams, and more often than not, they root for specific players. That's why athletes nowadays are like celebrities. That's why you know certain names coming of certain athletes. More than that, the nature of how WNBA specifically builds its culture is by the integration of the all-star system, where best players are highlighted, their statistics are displayed, and you will know who are the top best all-star in every season, right? So it already create a culture of idolization. You even have to play in an all-star game where all the all-stars are being picked and put into 3 different teams, and you have to play for the all-star games. Even from the beginning of the draft pick, they are drafting the best college player and the best new player, and they allow these best players to be displayed for all the teams and get picked, right? So I think that even by nature, sports fans are not merely liking the sport for what it is, but they like the people within it. So the bottom line is the growth of viewer, late or not, organic or not, need to be celebrated, and the only meaningful celebration is when excess profit is distributed back. Let me remind you that the current highest paid player in WNBA, which is Jackie, I forgot her last name, is paid only under $1 million, which is so far from what NBA has able to reach with the salary cap of 200 million, right? Think that with this amount of payment, it's about time. At least, please increase it to like $1 million at the very least. Like I think it will be such a menial thing to do, especially when your profit is almost 200% on ESPN, etc. But secondly, I think that we also need to appreciate the effort of individual people who are able to overcome adversity and actually become an idol, like Caitlin Clark, who single-handedly popularized WNBA and used her privilege as appealing white women to bring in her own fan base to make WNBA grow just by bringing her own fan base. And that's why I don't think that most of the concern and benefit that want to be co-opted by opposition can be co-opted, and a lot of the concern that they have is already been preempted even from the very beginning of our first speaker. That's why we back to propose. Thank you.
I thank the second affirmative speaker for the speech. To continue the case from side negative, I welcome the second negative speaker here.
Hi, am I audible, Chair?
Yes, you are.
Okay, hold on, let me set up a timer. Okay. Before I share my speech, I'll just say that anything I say is not reflective of my beliefs, or if there's any really sensitive topics, I'm really sorry, and I will put off a trigger warning. Now I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panelists, you must understand what is the burden inside of this debate as well, right? Okay. In our burden, if we can assure that without the lockout, they can get proper finances and better working conditions in the end, basically, of course, government wins the debate. But the thing is, they haven't said about how will they get proper finance aside from unpaid leave, and secondly, how will they get better working conditions in the end through that lockout itself. What they just say is public advocacy, but public advocacy is in fact inexclusive because we can do that by going through with the WNBA inside of 25 rather than opting into a lockout. Secondly, if we can assure success and viewership for the WNBA itself. In this clash, of course, again, actually, opposition gets much more viewership because we ride on the tide on the rising viewership inside of the industry as well, rather than government, where government just tries to lock out and it does not actually contribute towards viewership, because viewership, guess what, actually comes from fans that don't know any better actually. And how do we get them to move, right? How do we get these fans to move and to watch, right? To actually going through the WNBA rather than just locking up. Okay, what is Gov's verdict? If they can secure viewership and finances in the midst of the lockout without members of WNBA quitting, I'm going to highlight quitting and working overseas, because working overseas they win, because what we want is for the WNBA is to also be protected though. What we want is the Federation of WNBA to be protected, because it's one of the greatest ajang atau the greatest federation for these women to play basketball and to actually be productive, right? And that's why in this motion we do not want a lockout. Okay, I'm going to move on to my rebuttals intertwined with my clashes. First of all, what government says in regards towards morals and misogyny. What they say is that if there is misogynistic values inside of the market currently that value the NBA more than WNBA, and that in their house they can get better treatment after a lockout through public advocacy and unpaid leave and whatnot, right? And secondly, they said that lockouts will boost the morale of the internal team. Okay, we will respond to that. First of all, in regards to misogyny, one, because there is misogyny inside of the industry itself already, making a lockout will not improve it, but actually will increase the misogyny because the industry will think that, wow, see, women can't do sports. That's why they failed and lost to the NBA. And note that the characteristics of humans, especially fans that are men inside of the industry, is that they don't give a crap of how the federation. They'll just say that women are unable to do sports. What we want is to actually defeat that notion. Secondly, in regards towards these fans, actually the WNBA has most viewership from men as well, right? So we must try to treat them as, of course, a commodity to actually empower ourselves inside of the WNBA, both for the federation, both for the women inside to actually improve the conditions, right? In comparison, when we actually follow through with the high viewership inside of the WNBA, we can still gradually increase the working environments of the internal team by the narrative of even if we are in harsh environments, we women can still push through. And this actually decreases misogyny so much and actually shows how powerful women are in reality. And that is already evident inside of the sporting industry. Secondly, lockouts will not boost the morals of the internal team. Why? Because most of them actually have this job only. And how does it feel when our only source of income is taken away from us a whole year? Okay, exemption for those who are in modeling and whatnot, right? And of course, when we go to a lockout, it will instantly decrease viewership. And when there is a decrease in viewership, there is, of course, a decrease in sponsors, endorsements, and whatnot for these WNBA people, right? For these members. And even if they do get unpaid leave, the characteristic of these WNBA characters, because they are really, really ambitious, it's not about purely money as well. They have an athlete's pride of their reputation by wanting to top other male sports as well, like the NBA. And the way to do that is to push through and not lock out. Opposition believes by maintaining and improving the fans will increase public advocacy, and it will become incentive for the federation to also fall into the market incentive and because of a public push towards it to actually create a better environment for the woman, right? Especially when there is a clear voice out that can still be done. This will definitely help more rather than just locking out. Another point that it's not just because of misogyny that's financial compensation is low as well in the WNBA. Why? It's because it's young as well. And I will try to add in my arguments later. Secondly, when a government says, okay, we need to actively voice out to the management for better welfare. Actually, we are still able to voice out to the management for better welfare without a lockout. So that is actually inexclusive. And when government says people will still get an unpaid leave, as I've said before, this is also not good for the long term of these players and the WNBA Federation itself, right? Because of course, we want to create more economic input for the WNBA to actually run better for better environments inside of the internal team as well. So in the classes of lockouts will boost the morale of their team, misogynistic values, we win that clash. I will move on to my arguments. My first argument, if we do lock out the WNBA in 2025, it will put the members into a more vulnerable state. How is this true? The question will be, what is the biggest factor that contributes for the WNBA to be in harsh conditions right now? It will be limited revenue generation. I'm going to highlight limited revenue generation because it is a younger sport than the NBA itself. So the burden is trying to provide for the players inside of the WNBA. And how do we do that? Is to increase the revenue generation itself, in which we can see that the WNBA is already very, very famous. And as we can see in the viewership statistics, right? If we push through this 1 year in 2025 while still advocating for more financial compensation and better working environments without lockout, because viewership is already getting higher, we can amass more financial input for the WNBA to actually regulate for the players itself, right? Secondly, if we do a lockout, viewership will definitely drop and we lose a big chance of amassing economic input for the WNBA itself for these players, right? Because of course, there's a domino effect. So instead of locking out, we answer the burden of improving the conditions of these players through mechanization of A, working together with the NBA itself through marketing campaigns, and B, trying to push the tide of high viewership through fan engagement and trying to make sources of income, for example, for merchandise and etc., which is made possible with the increasing high rates of viewership and actually going through with it and not locking out, right? And that's why, in comparison, lockouts will inherently block out this economic and reputational flow of the people inside of the WNBA, and it will throw away once increasing viewership of the sports, even though it can act as a tipping point to create better environments for the current members of the WNBA and the future members as well. Secondly, it's about ruining women passion. Players, yes, they play for money, but they won't work hard to be in a team if they don't have the passion and love for their careers. Okay, now, of course, I will move on to my second argument because I don't have that much time. what we want is the NBA to still WNBA to still exist and to persevere because it's one of the biggest women's sports club. And if we get rid of that, it'll be hard for women's sports to try bounce back inside of the basketball industry, inside of America itself. And we will try to protect the WNBA because we, the members, actually have a chance to play with high viewership. And secondly, the WNBA can create a better process of feedback when they still continue in 2025 rather than being locked out with the viewers unable to actually see what happens inside of the field. If in the end they will be treated better and etc. Because that is also not answered by government side on how they will get treated in the end after the lockout, because it's just advocating and public advocacy, right? And because there are high viewerships, there will be more advocacy from the press as well, especially in the status quo. Women empowerment and policy change to compensate women power is really large inside of the status quo currently as well, and it is also increasing. Secondly, because they are very much. Secondly, what we can see is that these WNBA players will not quit. If they quit, we lose this. Government loses this play because if they are very much appreciated overseas, and we want to protect the WNBA from dispersing, right? And we have a better chance to improving the environment in the WNBA through pushing through the lockout and getting more economic input and actually treating the WNBA better than locking out. Because if they get locked out, there is a greater incentive for these members to actually go out to teams overseas because they lack media engagement and economic input inside of 2025. But then if we do continue with the WNBA, they are more empowered with more viewership, and of course they will try to still stay in the WNBA because there is a great incentive of those overseas. And what we want is to still keep the WNBA intact, right? And that is why in regards towards all of these clashes, in regards towards the WNBA members being empowered, going through with public advocacy, even though they are still going through it without a lockout, we always win this clash, and it is also always better for the members. Thank you very much. Proud to oppose.
All right, thank you for that speech. To close the affirmative substantive, I welcome the third affirmative speaker here.
All right, check. Am I audible?
Yep, audible.
All right, cool. Before I start my speech, I think give me like 1-2 minutes for a very short toilet break. I'll be back in 1 minute. Yeah.
Okay, just let us know, yeah, if you're
All right, check. Am I audible?
yes, you are.
All right, cool. I'm going to set up my timer. I'm going to start my. By the way, if I'm not clear, just cut me off in the middle with verbal warning. And then, yeah, okay. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, and 1. I think from what I have done throughout the debate, I think you can notice one thing. That is to say that hierarchy exists inside WNBA, which is basically team owners and managers have a higher leverage compared to the players. Hence, that's why you have a very bad welfare issue in the current status quo. This is what both the government, the affirmative teams wants to solve, and this is basically what the opposition tried to cope with their case. Unfortunately, failed to prove why. Then at the end of the day, their case works. I think there are only two main clashes in this debate. I think first, which way is the most effective in solving the pre-existing issue, and second, I think it will be about the comparisons of the offs of doing it currently, whether it would be better for the player or not. I think on the first clashes then on which way is the most effective. I think my first speaker have told you that there are very many contexts in the current status quo. First, that WNBA have a better leverage with rising statistics in all aspects, such as broadcast views and etc. Number two, my first speaker and second speaker have told you that self-fixing won't happen anyway because A, WNBA is too lenient to poor standards because now all the profits and benefits are directed to the teams, managers, and clubs and compromising the players' welfare. But the second, I think my first speaker have told you that the elites of the NBA is very reluctant to talk about inequality due to, for instances, the possible public misogyny between men. And thirdly, my first speaker have told you that the public don't really care about what happened in the NBA because currently many people think that it should not be popular because women basketball is not as interesting as men's inside their perception. But then my second speaker also have told you that WNBA really works on feminism value. That is to say that even if for some instances that we do lockdown and not playing for an entire season, it doesn't mean that the support for it ends because you have, for instance, feminist factors in the society. And to that, I don't think feminism will end just because WNBA is locked down, right? But then I think also my second speaker have told you that WNBA doesn't really need like a K-pop agency, and because these teams and clubs are not working in a deficit anyway. So I don't think why there's an urgency for opposition to keep this running system that need to be tackled down in the current status. I think the whole opponent case in terms of efficiency, basically first they say that they want to play and advocate at the same time. Number two, they told fans only for entertainment and have loyalty on the job itself. And number three, they have this narrative that you must fight misogyny by showing that women can go through harsh conditions as well, and you should keep this on media. Let's tackle down these arguments in my responses. I think first then on the strategy on playing and advocate very same time. I think first my I have told you that it is not a consistent activism, but number B then I think that playing while advocating is a form of agreeableness to the existing standard, right? Why so? Because this is how fans and other parties might perceive players should they keep playing. They might see all their issues of welfare and etc. as a minor issue since you have no possible problems in their eyes, right? As people in general tend to simplify things into black and white. And if you can do things normally, I think people will just opt into the status quo bias, thinking that there is no problem with the status quo because everything is working very well, right? Meaning that when you play and camping at the same time, your voice are more silent and less impactful as your concerns are seen by the fans as less urgent due to human status quo bias. But I think the previous analysis also means that voicing out to management while keep playing in WNBA as what DLO have told you, it's not possible to solve any problem because one, management is very profit driven because if there is no change in the revenues of WNBA, why would they change their ways in conducting their business, right? Why would they suddenly care the business? The reasons why boycott exists is because it do really makes managers think twice about the ways they conduct their business. At the end of the day, but then B then on their context of the LO and LO about fans focus, they say and on the game. Look, in this context, there's a reason why we have football fanatics in the current status quo, to the degree that they can kill other people just because they are from the different fans club, like Jackmania versus Boboto. The reason is because, as what Kak just have told you, is because there is idolatry and also cult of personality on the players and on the club at the same time by the fans, right? I think my second speaker also further told you why this is true in WNBA, because WNBA have all-star system where we rank Dino women basketball player, which creates a form of legend and glorified player in the processes, meaning that idolatry and cult of personality is very likely to exist. I think fans' loyalty lies on these players and clubs instead of just having a fun entertainment and game. But then thirdly, then on the very confusing part of their case where they say that there is like they want to push a narrative that women is also very strong and they can go through harsh condition and they want to keep it on media. I think you cannot really co-op between players' welfare and also players' welfare and also keeping playing normally, like in the current status quo. Because if you kept playing, it means two things. One, either you shows people nothing is wrong as my previous responses to opposition strategy, but two, you're just basically normalizing things and make society adapt to all these harsh and bad conditions and make society perceive it as something normal. This is not exactly what affirmative wanted. But then we are very confused on why DLO assumes that just because you're not playing, suddenly you have no media coverage to advocate your thoughts, right? Look, these ultra players already have cult of personality and fans, meaning that you can still join activities that is non-WNBA, such as press conferences, interviews, or speaking out on the team or personal social media, and so on and so forth. You have still many ways to have media coverage. So I don't really think that it is very urgent to gain media coverage just by through playing. I think the way is then simple there. Who are more effective in sounding the message? I think A, we have playing while advocating doesn't really work. That's why B, in affirmative, we want a complete radical action of locking down and not playing for the entire season so that we can push our urgency to the public. But I think the faults and benefit of the lockdown. I think we have told you many things, right? We have told you it's basically not investment anymore because we are already quite big, and B, we want to invest in player welfare simply because we want to attract more successes and improve the game in WNBA. I think in opposition, they only have one point regarding the benefit and the delta. They told you that you will have less revenue since marketing needs money and you need more sponsors and etc. I think first let's just tackle all the issues in this clash. I think first let's talk about better viewership. I think opposition told you that if you stop playing, suddenly you will lose all your viewers. Look, again, I don't think this is the case, but two, if money is the biggest concern in opposition, and if it's the key tipping point, doesn't having a better quality of players, which will make better games, will improve the entertainment factor in any game. Should you have better players to create a better game in the processes, right? Meaning that if you want to get all opposition benefit, A, government's case is the prerequisite, but B, I think we have proven to you that the impact is marginally better because A, you improve the players' welfare in the process, but B, we think this is also a long-term investment by having short-term risk of locking down and stop playing because again, you want people to see WNBA as something worthy, and that's why we propose.
I thank the third affirmative speaker for that speech. To close negative
Check the mics are inaudible. Pronunciation. Timers starting in 3, 2, and 1. That's clear. Affirmative mention is only about them afraid of stepping out of their comfort zone, especially in America, and overthinking towards the consequences that is not even settled yet. At the end of the day, in the status quo, we have but we need quality and respect in the system itself. This quality and respect is what keeps the wheel moving for both of the players and the fans itself. That comes down to a lot of benefit towards the actor we are trying to protect, which is the WNBA league itself. In order to win within this motion, there are two main things that needs to be heavily answered. The first one is simple. The question is, should WNBA be locked out or not, despite the benefits and opportunity that we have been given in the status quo itself? Second of all, how do we best protect the interests of the actor, where both sides of the house agree that it is mainly about income and the protection of respect of the woman player itself. Therefore, we are confident to continue to oppose. The speech will be divided into 3 courses. Firstly is pointing out the framing of his debate. Second is the clashes in his debate, which will be intertwined by the structural rebuttals at the end of the day. Firstly, then, the premise of framing his argument in this motion. Let's bolt down the mechanism of locking out and understand how it actually works in the status quo. The media only see a sport organization if it's active, right? Locking out is to prevent this organization from having or even being able to take a part of something in the federation itself. So therefore, the league is not within it, right? It is unfair when they clarify their limitation from the very beginning about how they will still do a campaign and protest for the federation or internal system to improve. The likelihood under affirmative is not going to work or run down in the status quo. Why? Because the moment when a league is locking out, then people won't see or count or count their voice because they're not within the system progress itself. At least under our side of the house, our voice as a league is still being taken accountable because we are still continuing the activity of our league, right? So for affirmative, the evaluation should be within the framing on how they will improve the situation in WNBA. Let's just go forward on second of all, which is the main clash itself. The clash in this debate is mainly about the consideration of mechanism, whether we should lock out or not, right? Simple. They give us a few points here. First of all, they talk about the scale of priority within the system, within the federation, also within the interest of the actor in this debate. Second of all, they talk about how the fame rising is not the way to improve, but rather locking out is the way to improve, right? And C, they talk about how misogyny perceivement is a very, very big deal within the growth and investment in the women's NBA league itself. How do we compare and weigh this, right? There will be three points of weighing. First of all, let's talk about the scale of priority itself. My first and speaking speaker, Annabelle Archie, brings about the priority of money income and love, respect, passion of the player itself. But let's then play in their case scenario, right? Where woman in field is not being respected enough. So therefore, the WNBA is going to lock out. The likelihood of the media or the people caring about your voice, caring about the continuity of the league itself will also be less respected because understand in the gains of entertainment sector that is what they want is to be active, right? So therefore the moment you stop being active, people will not respect you in any way. So therefore if you wanted a respect, if you wanted it to continually gradually or even slowly improving, then what you need to do is fix those respect itself that coming down from the viewers, that comes down from the media itself, right? Second of all, let's talk about the mainly about the player and WNBA career itself, right? Understand that these kind of sports league, let's not talk about basketball, but other sports as well, it is a one-time chance analogy. If you fail in that season or if you fail in these kind of few years, then you will eventually fail down all of your careers that you have built for years, right? And we have also given that these kind of thing, women's NBA is sometimes the only source of income for the players itself. They can't do uh, two jobs at one time. They can't do three jobs at one time because they need to focus on practicing. They need to focus on training for the season that is upcoming, right? So therefore, there's no other source of income that is good for the woman to keep up with their family itself. And also, they talk about how sponsors won't work in the status quo. There is not a fair trade-off because it is modeling and so on. It's not a fair trade-off then. Let's do a check and balance of the woman career itself, right? WNBA is known to be one of the biggest league in America itself, and it is the only way where a woman chance can be seen in the status quo itself, right? So therefore, if the moment we locked out one season, for example, or if we locked out for a long period of time, then therefore there's no other platform for one basketball career to grow in America. That is what we need, right? Understand that the contextualization that we bring is mainly about in America because understand the misogyny perspective that is going on is in America itself. But then my second speaker has told you about how for example, in Russia, in Asia, they're being very, very well respected and treated like what they have been treated. They have signed contract millions of dollars, but then they get treated fairly. Understand that these kind of things only happen in America because America still perceive this woman as unproductive. They still perceive this woman as something that is not consistent and weak. So therefore, we need to understand how to tackle those kind of things, right? Affirmative claim that by our mechanism is that our voice will not be heard when we play and advocate in the system. They keep attacking us, but then they never give any ideas on why then, by locking down, the Federation would see it as an urgency under the side of the house. When there is no viewers in the season and the players aren't productive of the training because they aren't preparing for the season itself, coming from the get-go, Federation cares when the player are existing consistently and the rising of the viewers itself. This is why incentive of WNBA in the status quo is touching the smaller town, not only Las Vegas, Washington, LA, and so on, you name it. There are a lot of other alternatives that can be used instead of locking out the teams itself. Last point then is about the promotion of the women careers itself and how do we continually or gradually make it in the long term with you, right? The moment you back down, the moment you lock out of the careers of WNBA for maybe one season or not, you will not improve it, but you will bury it down under the soil. Promotion can only be done if the league aren't locked out. Because who is going to buy in and who is going to give money to those facilities that are needed to improve? Understand that this facility, that this healthcare system can only be improved when there is money and cycle going on. At least under our side of the house, even if we are in a harsh environment, we still try to actually give facilities to this player. We still try to give them a better healthcare system that came from the promotion and that came from the people and the consumers at the end of the day, right? Women can still survive, and it'll not be seen as like a league that is tangible towards being vanished and so on and so forth from the existence. Then that is why we my second speaker has told you that there's other aspect of disparities that exists, not only by respect of the people perspective, but also by time. That is why there's comparison of time, like 90 years compared to 30 years, like what the affirmative team have said. Then the time itself is justifiable for them to grow and understand that there's a lot of promotion stuff that keeps going on, like the promotion of jersey, the promotion of shoe collaboration and billboard things. They would choose NBA over WNBA because why? Because WNBA is not active. When you lock down a system, when you lock down a season, that means that there's less promotion of jerseys, there's less promotion of teams, there's less promotion of other stuff that can actually lead to less income that goes on the facilities and less income that goes on in the training of the player itself. By the consideration of all the spectrum in this debate, negative, proudly opposed. Thank you very much.
And thank the third negative speaker. To sum up the negative case, I welcome the negative reply here.
Okay, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panels, why burn the whole house down just to fix a leaky faucet? A WNBA lockout is not like a quote-unquote like power move. It is like a self-inflicted penalty which scores 0 points for progress. So, opposition side has clearly demonstrated and explained until the very end how a lockout for the WNBA failed to meet the objective both sides agree on, which is improving the players' financial compensation, better working conditions, and like overall respect within and throughout the system, right? But let's be clear, as my third speaker has mentioned, the government's bench relies on the fear of stepping out of the comfort zone, and they only think of like hypothetical consequence that is unproven. In the status quo, WNBA is already seen to have this huge growth in viewerships, which means growth in recognition and opportunities to bring systemic change. What is needed is not this very sudden and like disruptive lockout, but rather a focus on improving the quality and respect within the system that currently exists. Our side not only oppose locking out the WNBA from opportunities and benefits, but we also protect the interests of actors involved by preserving the league's functionality while at the same time advocating for a better working condition in a way that ensures like a long-term sustainability. So let's analyze this debate a little more, right? So lockout means a prevention from participation, which stretches to fans, sponsors, and or like media. So Prop's suggestion on like campaigning and protest during the lockout is very flawed because the media and like the public view primarily engage with organizations or in this case leagues that are active. Without these games and without these visibility, then the WNBA's voice will just be even more marginalized than before. Meanwhile, under our side, we give this approach where the league will still be able to operate and like maintain their relevance while at the same time create opportunities to push for improvements from within. The government has failed to clarify how their mechanism of lockout can realistically improve the situation even though they are jeopardizing with its progress. Now, to close like this super short reply speech, I would like to mention again how the opposition has successfully answered the burden of this debate and elaborate on how the lockout like imposes unnecessary risk and does not guarantee the like desired outcomes in the very end. By continuing operations and instead like pushing for this systemic change from within, we protect the income, welfare, and respect of WNBA players while we still ensure the league's growth. So let's not bench while the WNBA it is finally gaining momentum, which is why until the very end, I'm proud to oppose.
Reply for to close this debate, I welcome the affirmative reply.
Okay, am I audible? Okay, give me a sec. Going to start in 3, 2, 1. Mind you that it is very immoral when an organization, any organization, starts to operate from the top down and sacrifice losses and glorified narrative of martyrs to their lowest structure, which is the player. These are the people that negative us borderline forced to just settle to compromise with the current system of WNBA. All of their benefit in improvement would only work if there is any analysis to why WNBA, as identified by affirmative as part of the problem, would have incentive to want to make any changes in the first place. If they want to argue on productivity, we need to prove for ourselves and all that particular argumentation, we have explained productivity can exist when there is better work environment and welfare, which is fair. How are you forcing people to work hard without proper payment when the elite of WNBA and investor benefit from it? Also, most of the context on how long this player have worked plus how much investment put on broadcast are not responded. This is unstrategic, right? WNBA is making very poor decision in regard to how they allocate their money. This is my very first contention as first speaker as well. This is already enough to answer WIP concern on we need to prove ourselves. That's not going to work because that's not the issue. Reminding you as well that opposition has been very dismissive to a very important point. Why catalyst for improvement can exist when WNBA themselves are part of the problem. All their responses are dismissive to all this context. Assessment that I will do is 3. First of all, I will remind you in regard to whether or not that the analysis, comparative, and context are already there between all these two themes, engaging it to each of the reminder, of course. So first reminder, there is a very clear separation that need to be made, and we have to make it since the very beginning in regard to what the support of the lockout. We have to differentiate ourselves from the bad practice and the WNBA is doing. The concern that if player cannot get money or like prosperity is already answered. It has been clarified by Grace that when you don't participate in games, you still get to be able to be paid. But has been preempted as well since the very first speaker on how do you get access to profit regardless whether the value of advocacy somehow matter for the player more rather than profit. And also this is agreed upon by negative team, by the way, which say that player who don't care about money exist, which mean that they are more tight-knit, and we already characterize them as the majority of the player exempt from the existence of some privileged player who might not feel like all of this is relevant. This is an enough explanation to answer, and comparatively is better in regard to whether or not the decision is representative enough toward the player. Second point of reminder, negative do not explain the catalyst to how and why WNBA would improve themselves. Understand that the problem have been established by affirmative, which is one, WNBA's organization that have practice of misogynistic behavior, but two, impact of the strategy and progressive generation of WNBA, which ignore the mass audiences of fans. They say that it will halt the season, which impact the growth. But the question is that, why should we care about the growth of WNBA that is not aligned and symmetric to the growth of the player that has contributed so much in the practice and also improvement of popularity of NBA? Affirmative want us to be symmetrical. We also explain, by the way, why the stagnancy is somehow catalyst toward poor performance from player and also why decreased morale. But we also already explained the catalyst better. 3 things. The risk of losing momentum from WNBA that see as this being profitable now, meaning they have to be forced to listen. But profit from WNBA that are going to decrease would also mean they will listen. But also anger from fans that will be directed to WNBA as well. The point is, you don't have this incentive on negative them, because you need to be able to lock out. You need to be able to actively tell them gonna point to make controversy in order for you to listen to me. So the absence of incentive that come from the technology is something that you only can exclusively resolve on our side. Lastly, in regard to advocacy, I don't think that you can do campaign hand in hand with playing, as it's muting and also silencing the ability for people to consistently believe in that particular advocacy. But also, fans are not evil. They believe that you as an idol are more important than entertainment themselves, which is why we believe that they are going to stick by the player and team and not WNB.
I thank the affirmative reply for that speech. With that being said, yeah, that marks the end of this debate. Thank you everyone for the speeches. So yeah, maybe as you guys know already in the previous round, so I will ask all of you to please wait for a while in the main hall. Yeah, 20 minutes at max,